Hello, I'm Brian. I'm going to talk to you all about the Freudian view of anosognosia. As we've discussed, anosognosia means denial of illness, and there is relatively little research that has been conducted about the condition. There has been dozens of theories aiming to decipher the condition, but the main two theories are the Freudian view, which I will talk about, and the neurological view, which Jordan will talk about. In the Freudian view, the theory is that the disabled patient just may not want to face up to his or her paralysis. Ramachandran is convinced of the reality of psychological defenses and the central role that they play in human nature. The coping strategies of the two hemispheres of the brain are much different than one another. The left hemisphere's job is to create a belief system or model and to fold new experiences into that belief system. If there is new information that arises that does not fit the model, it relies on Freudian defense mechanisms to deny, repress, or confabulate anything to keep things the way they are. The right hemisphere strategy, however, is to look for discrepancies. Without the right hemisphere to consistently keep the left in check by playing devil's advocate, the left hemisphere can do whatever it wants. It can pursue its normal agenda without the right nagging it. The left hemisphere is considered to represent Freud's ego. There are 5 main defense mechanisms that Freud theorized about that include denial, repression, reaction formation, rationalization, and humor. The first one is denial. The most straightforward mechanism is outright denial. An example of this is, my arm is working fine. I can move my left arm. It's not paralyzed. Repression is the second. Patients will usually admit after enough questioning that they indeed are paralyzed. Soon after, however, they will most likely begin to deny questions again. This is repressing their confession because only a few moments earlier, they were finally admitting to their disability. This situation shows solid proof that genuine repression is taking place. There is no possibility that the experimenter is influencing the patient's behavior. Reaction formation is the third. This is the tendency for an individual to state the exact opposite of what they honestly believe to be true of themselves. Example about this is, a woman says that she can lift a table up off the ground with her working right hand. When asked if she can lift the table up with her paralyzed left hand, she says, "Yes, I can lift that even higher off the ground with my left hand." Rationalization is the fourth. Rationalization is coming up with an excuse as to why you could not engage in a certain task, dealing with the paralyzed limb. An example of this is, when a man was asked to raise both of his arms, he raised his right arm in the air and said that he was using his left arm, which was the paralyzed limb, to balance himself so that he could raise his right arm. A term having to do with rationalization is the word confabulation. This is more rare, but this is when an individual will say that they are performing a task when they are not physically doing what they are asked to do whatsoever. An example of this is, "I am touching your nose with my left hand," or, "Yes, of course I am clapping," when in reality they are doing neither of these. Humor is the fifth. Not only can humor help patients avoid unfavorable positions, but it can help all of us. Freud was well aware of this as well. Think of any situation that you have been in when your nervous laugh comes out to stay away from your awkwardness. After seeing many patients, Ramachandran is convinced that the best solution for humans to stray away from uncomfortable situations is humor. Many patients are not even aware that they are being humorous, but rather are funny on accident. Projection is the last of these defense mechanisms. Projection is a type of tactic used to avoid confronting a disability. We somehow manage to blame it on someone else. An example of this is, "This paralyzed arm is my brother's, because I know for a fact that it is not my arm." One experiment done in the book is represented by Mrs. Dodds. She is completely paralyzed on the left side of her body after a stroke damaged the right hemisphere of her brain. Ramachandran did an experiment with her to see if she could successfully screw in a light bulb or tie a pair of shoelaces. She will receive $5 for screwing in the light bulb and $10 for tying the pair of shoelaces together. Ramachandran assumed that she would go for the easier task and screw in the light bulb, but to his amazement she chose to tie the pair of shoelaces together. Mrs. Dodds tried and tried to tie the shoelaces together, but to her dismay, she could not complete the task. Ramachandran finally had to pull the shoe away from her. The next day, Mrs. Dodds was asked what she did the day before during this experiment. She said she was asked to tie a pair of shoelaces together. She was then asked if she completed the task. Mrs. Dodds then stated, "Oh yes, I tied it successfully with both of my hands." She of course did not. Now I want to talk about some of the problems with the Freudian view. The first problem with the Freudian view is that it fails to explain the difference in the extent of psychological defense mechanisms between patients with anosognosia and those people who are not experiencing this disorder. It does not make much sense why these mechanisms are usually very subtle in us, while in patients with denial they are extremely amplified. In Chapter 7, it gives this example. If I were to fracture my left arm and damage certain nerves, and you asked me whether I could beat you in a game of tennis, I might tend to play down my injury a little, asserting, "Oh, yes, I can beat you. My arm is getting much better, you know. But I certainly wouldn't take a bet that I could arm wrestle you. Or if my arm were completely paralyzed, hanging limb at my side, I would not say, 'Oh, I can see it touching your nose,' or 'It belongs to my brother.' This is just not reasonable." The second problem with the Freudian view is that it doesn't clarify the asymmetry of the syndrome. The denial that is mostly seen in patients appears due to the damage to the brain's right hemisphere, which results in the paralysis of the left side of the body. When patients experience damage to the left hemisphere of the brain, causing paralysis in the right side of the body, this denial is rarely ever seen. This is very intriguing why there is denial with damage done to one hemisphere and not denial when there is damage done to the other. With either hemisphere damaged, you might assume an equal amount of disability, frustration, and the need for psychological defense, but it turns out that people with damage to their left hemisphere are not only completely aware of their paralysis, but also constantly talk about it. Thank you very much for listening to my video.